There is a renaissance. There's a newness in Detroit, a rebirth.
It has been called Paris of the Midwest, the motor vehicle capital of the world.
Sanders on the draw. Longest run of the game, and he's in the clear. Oh, what a move! Oh, my!
I wear the Detroit D all around the world. It's a medal of honor. It means home to me.
Catholepistemiad, as it was first named, meaning an Academy of Universal Knowledge. The University of Michigania was established in Detroit on August 26, 1817. Over 200 years later, it may seem hard to imagine one of the world's leading universities and Michigan's oldest, with its long list of prominent alumni and an almost $12 billion endowment fund beginning modestly in a small building at Bates and Congress Streets in Detroit. In 1805, at the turn of the 19th century, the newly formed Michigan Territory was still mostly wilderness, with its capital, Detroit, having a population of only 1,000, mostly French settlers, yet several of its leading residents felt the need to have a public education system established. Leading the lobby for an academy to be built was Father Gabriel Rashaw, pastor of St. Anne de Detroit Church, Detroit's first structure, built in 1701. Father Rashaw was already running several other schools, as well as printing Detroit's first news publication, the Michigan Essay. It was Father Gabriel Rashaw who wrote the city of Detroit's motto after the Great Fire of 1805. Penned in Latin, Spirimus meliora resurgit seneribus, meaning, we hope for better things. It shall rise from the ashes. When the university was founded in 1817, Detroit was still recovering from the Great Fire of 1805 and had already suffered a series of battles for control of the prosperous fur-trading territory. The city was suddenly attacked in 1812 and captured by British troops, aided by Native American Shawnee warriors in the siege of Detroit during the War of 1812. Father Rashaw was held captive by the British after refusing to swear an oath of allegiance to Britain, stating, "I have taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, and I cannot take another. Do with me as you please." He was released when Shawnee Chief Tecumseh, who was known for his hatred of Americans, refused to fight against them while Rashaw was imprisoned by Tecumseh's British allies. By 1815, Detroit had been reclaimed by the United States and incorporated as a city. As part of a land deal between the United States and several Native tribes of the region, Rashaw, who was revered by many Native Americans he'd given school lessons and ministered to, was granted land from the tribes to be used for what they called the College at Detroit. In 1817, Augustus Woodward, Chief Justice of the Michigan Territory, appointed by President Thomas Jefferson, drafted an act establishing Michigan's first university, blueprinting an innovative public educational system of universal sciences. Officially named the University of Michigan in 1821, this ambitious undertaking, created by some of the country's most profound visionaries of the time, wasn't yet realized by residents who were mostly fur traders or farmers with little need for higher education. So the university declined and closed by 1827, continuing to exist in name only. More fights for territory led to a short-lived border dispute between Michigan and Ohio in 1835, known as the Michigan-Ohio War or Toledo War, that later paved the way for an epic rivalry between the University of Michigan and Ohio State football teams. Ceasing to function in Detroit, what would later become U of M moved to Ann Arbor in 1837, when the state constitution required the state capital be moved from Detroit, away from British-controlled Canada, to a more central and safer location in the state's interior. A group of speculators in Ann Arbor set aside 40 acres of undeveloped land and offered it to the state of Michigan as the site of the proposed state capital, but lost the bid to Lansing, a village with no more than 20 people. The first classes in Ann Arbor were held in 1841 with 7 students, 6 freshmen and a sophomore, taught by 2 professors. 12 students graduated in the first commencement in 1845, and the school had its first African-American student in 1853 when Samuel Coles Watson was accepted into the university's medical department. There were virtually no college-trained African-Americans in the country at this time, and only a handful of colleges accepted any African-American students. Watson was prohibited from practicing medicine in Detroit, but opened a drugstore and was regarded as the city's richest black property owner by 1867, later becoming Detroit's first African-American elected official. During the American Civil War, men from Detroit volunteered to fight for the Union, including the 24th Michigan Infantry Regiment, part of the legendary Iron Brigade, which fought with distinction and suffered 82% casualties at the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. George Armstrong Custer led the Michigan Brigade during the Civil War, calling them the Wolverines. When the 1st Volunteer Infantry Regiment arrived to fortify Washington, D.C., President Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying, "Thank God for Michigan." Following the Civil War, the sport of football became popular as a war game to keep young men in constant battle-ready condition. By 1912, the University of Michigan adopted maize and blue as its school colors and were facing off in annual scrimmages with their scarlet and gray southern border rivals, Ohio State. Referred to as the game, it has grown in intensity from their first contest in 1897 and is arguably regarded as the most bitter rivalry of any sport. Detroit Mayor and Michigan Governor Hazen S. Pingree had a son who played halfback on that Michigan team. Ironically, the winged helmet design made famous by Michigan was first worn by Ohio State with a similar style in 1930, followed by Michigan State in 1933, before the Wolverines adopted it in 1938. In celebration of a Michigan win over Ohio State following their first battle, a music student named Louis Elbel created the iconic Michigan fight song titled "The Victors." Coined the Harvard of the West, today's list of Michigan alumni is astonishing. The 38th President of the United States, the first American to walk in space and drive on the moon, creators of Google, Photoshop, and Skype, legendary athletes, designers and engineers, entertainers, inventors, politicians, surgeons, writers, an endless list with endeavors reaching a zenith of worldwide accomplishments. In 2019, U of M announced its return to Detroit after 162 years away, with plans to build a $300 million Detroit Center for Innovation and create the next generation of leaders and best from Detroit's own University of Michigan.